Are we actually starting the podcast now?
Yeah, you got to make it casual, man.
No, man. This is the first episode. We can't just rock up here like everybody knows who we are.
We don't have a name.
You get me?
We don't have a name.
We haven't even got a name.
Yeah, so...
man's come here talking about Maggi as if it's his side chick or something.
It probably is everybody's side chick at the moment.
Right.
Because we can't live without it.
Anyways, we need to say at least this is episode 1 of the Nameless Podcast.
Is that what we're calling it? The Nameless Podcast?
It doesn't need to have a name at the moment, did it? Because we don't even know what it is.
I was actually going to think, I was saying like something like yet another podcast.
Yet another podcast. with two black boys. As if there aren't enough podcasts with black people. You know, how many more do we need?
I mean, as long as you got something to talk about, then
I don't even know if I've got something to talk about, to be honest.
I mean, we tend to have these like weird ass like random conversations that just spur out of nothing. So.
Yeah, like you're very passionate about Maggi, which we're going to talk about in a bit.
Yeah, I mean, because you know, like I've gone on that salt and pepper diet. What so this is allowed.
So Ambi wants to talk about Maggi. Ambi has got a burning issue about Maggi, and he wants to tell us why has he got such a big problem with Maggi. Go on, Ambi. Let me hear it. What is your beef with Maggi? What has Maggi done to you?
Okay, listen. It's not what Maggi has done to me, but it's what Maggi has done to us in general, right? So, right, we have actually forgotten how to cook without it. Because we were trying yesterday to make some like a native food, right?
Yeah.
And we were trying to like mix a bunch of ingredients and stuff to try and make it work.
Yeah.
But it didn't actually taste that good.
Yeah.
And so we ended up having to put like 2 cubes of Maggi to bring back the taste.
But let's be honest here. Isn't Maggi just black people's way of saying that we've seasoned our food? Isn't that just, you know, the food is seasoned, that means it's got Maggi. Like, literally, that's all it is.
And see, that's my problem with it.
How else are you meant to season the food, if there's no Maggi in it? It's like in Jamaica, in Jamaica, we've got Maggi, yeah?
Yeah.
But, like, I think most Jamaicans would talk about Maggi cock soup. So you use it when you're boiling soup, yeah?
Yeah.
But I think the equivalent to Maggi in Jamaica is something that we call all-purpose seasoning. Yeah. So it's basically the same thing. It's like, I don't know if you've ever been to one of those corner shops, African and East Indian corner shops, and you see the Duns River seasoning. Yeah. And there's one there called all-purpose seasoning.
Yeah.
And that's the Jamaican equivalent. So we just chucked that on everything. But that's basically you saying the food is seasoned. You get me? Like the food, if it hasn't got some all-purpose seasoning, the food is not seasoned.
But I think, there's probably a difference between that all-purpose seasoning because it's got like spices and all that stuff. Not saying Maggi doesn't have spices, but I think you can make an all-purpose seasoning, right? With like proper spices, and the food will taste nice. But the problem with Maggi is like all these like artificial ingredients and stuff, and that. Make it, this like, we've gotten our palate so used to that high level of, what you
like
call it?
Ultra processed spices?
Yeah, that kind of like taste that when we actually cook with real ingredients, it's like, it doesn't taste as good anymore, which is a problem because if you look at the ingredients of Maggi, because, we talk about like cooking from home and stuff, right? But what's the difference between putting in, like, let's say 3 cubes of Maggi in your dish or 2 cubes of Maggi in your dish, right? And just buying something in McDonald's because you've effectively just made it food, processed food, given all the ingredients from the Maggi.
I think as like for me, as much as I have been on this journey of, I think I came off ultra processed foods in about 2022. I was going to say 2002. I was like, no, that's not right. That's not right. 2022 is when I came off ultra processed foods. And at the time, I imagined that it was going to be something that's going to be really, really hard to do. So, and I still think that you can't wean yourself off ultra processed foods 100% because you'll never know every single ingredient that's in everything that you eat. Because, if you go out for a meal, for example, if you buy something on the street, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know what ingredients they've put in there. So I have sort of given myself a little bit of leeway to say that, like, I'm going to come off ultra processed foods as far as, like, I can tell. So if I know that for a fact that the food has UPF, I'm going to try my best not to eat it, But obviously, if I've gone out for dinner, I'm not going to call the chef and say, "Yo, chef, what have you put in this food?" You know what I mean? Have you put Maggi? You know what I mean? I'm not going to. So I think you got to be reasonable with it, and I think for a lot of people, it's a journey, and I'm probably a more sympathetic towards it than maybe the stance that you're taking, actually, because a lot of people are only just finding out about the dangers of UPF and certain ingredients like emulsifiers and dextrose and another one, I can't remember the name of it now, but all those nasty ingredients are bad for your gut health, and it's got a lot of sugar, and it's going to spike your glucose and that sort of thing. I feel like that is a new thing. And I don't know if as many people are as educated on that as you'd hope. And so for me, it's going to take time, and people, as you say, they've gotten used to a certain kind of taste, innit? They've gotten used to that Maggi taste, that all-purpose seasoning taste, so it's going to take time for them to replace that with healthier option. But I think the biggest and most important thing that I think that we can do in all of this is to try and educate people. We have to try and educate people. So if you ask me, my beef isn't with Maggi. My beef isn't with Maggi. I think my biggest beef with, Afro-Caribbean diet is perhaps more to do with the carbs that we consume. I think we eat in a way as if we're still plowing the land. You get me? Like, we're still we're still farmers and that. We're still on the plantation.
But here's the thing.
That's my beef.
It's I think, because if you go to a place like Nigeria, people are not obese, right? There's no obesity. There's no obesity, and the thing, because I think our diet has evolved. Sort of like we've evolved along with our diet and the climate that we live. So when you step outside the house, the sun would beat it out of you, because and people walk a lot. But like over here, right? You drive a lot. You take the bus. You get an Uber. You sit down. A lot of our work is like sedentary and stuff. But back in like Africa, Nigeria, I'm speaking about Nigeria, not really the whole of Africa, because I don't know. But the jobs are not really kind of sedentary like that. There's a lot more walking. There's a lot more socializing as well. From here, like for example, when I get back home, I'm like chilling at home and then watching some TV, and then you go to bed, and the next day you're off to work.
Can I ask you a question? Again. Can I ask you a question? What is the biggest cause of death in Nigeria? Have you ever looked it? Have you ever looked that up?
Sure, no.
I think you should look.
Really?
I think you should. I think you should look, because in Jamaica, they often say that Jamaicans are either from Nigeria or Ghana, and I think largely that's true. But because we've got a lot in common. But the biggest cause of death in Jamaica, and I actually looked this up because I was in Jamaica last year,
Yeah.
And the biggest cause of death in Jamaica is diabetes.
Diabetes. Oh, yeah.
Diabetes. Diabetes. And actually, while I was there was something on telly, a health report. And they were saying that diabetes is not just an old person's like disease anymore, that a lot of young people in their 20s and 30s have got diabetes. I mean, talking from experience, I've got family members in their 20s that's got diabetes, like right now, you know.
I'm just looking it up now. I'm seeing some, heart disease and coronary heart disease, stroke. Of course, there's like infectious diseases and then malaria.
Right.
And then road traffic accidents.
Interesting. So you've got heart disease, and that's going to be to do with your cholesterol, isn't it? So like,
I suppose
a lot of people,
that's true, isn't it?
If you cook with a lot of oil, for example, so that's quite interesting actually. So diabetes doesn't factor on there.
No, diabetes doesn't come up because
shocking.
Yeah, what I'm seeing here is infectious diseases like pneumonia and stuff, cardiovascular diseases. I suppose like heart diseases and stroke and stuff. That's all to do with your diet and cholesterol level.
Yeah, I mean strokes especially, because strokes are usually because of a combination of hypertension and diabetes as well. So I think there's a correlation there. There might not be causation, as they like to say in science, and causation or correlation doesn't mean causation, does it? So there might be some correlation, but it doesn't mean that there's causation. But in Jamaica, diabetes is like an epidemic. I don't know if it's because Jamaica is an island and nobody is walking anywhere, but like I tell you, bro, I'm serious. Like in Jamaica, people eat carbs round the clock. They get up and for breakfast, their breakfast is like boiled dumplings and yam and green bananas with some brown stew chicken. You get me? Like that is their breakfast, fam. And then for lunch, and these people, they're not working on any plantations. They're not like doing any active jobs. These are people who are jumping in their cars and driving to work, to sit at work at their desk jobs for 9 hours. So they have that brown stew chicken with fried dumplings, or not fried, well, maybe even fried dumplings as well. Fried dumplings or boiled dumplings or green bananas. And then lunchtime, so they drive to work, and lunchtime, it's rice and peas and chicken for lunch. I'm not even joking. It's like a box food. They have rice and peas and chicken for lunch,
But again, so basically, these are kind of like sort of like native cultural foods and stuff. What has changed between then and now? Is it what is used to cook it?
What has changed is that we were more active. That is what has changed. So, you mentioned earlier that in Nigeria, people still walk into places. Like most people in Jamaica who are eating these big meals and so on, that can get up and have the fried dumplings and brown stew chicken for breakfast, and then rice and peas and chicken for lunch.
See, that's my last memory of Nigeria, by the way. So I'm not sure if people are still walking to places and stuff like that.
This is the thing, like the people who can afford to eat them lavish meals here. You know what I mean? Like they're not walking anywhere. They're jumping in their fancy cars, bro. They live uptown, and they've got office jobs, so they're not walking anywhere. They've got the gym membership that they're not using. So you know what I mean? So what they do they're living their best life. That's what it is.
Yeah, but that's
that's the problem.
The whole definition of developing and developed world and stuff. I don't know if it's really helping us, because if you think of how we, first of all, we've created a way to manufacture foods in the lab and, ultra processed stuff. And then we've also created jobs that don't require people to be active. and then we pair those two together. That's a very deadly combination.
I mean, it's dangerous. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think ultra processed foods, especially that are foods that are addictive, and I think as well, what I'd throw into the mix of that, you're right, is perhaps it would be bad enough if they were just eating these big breakfasts and lunches and dinners, and then that was it. You know what I mean? If because they've got access to the chocolate bars and the junk food, and the sugar, the ultra processed UPF bad stuff as well, that are high in calories, that are very calorie dense and packed with like salts and that sort of thing. So they've got access to that as well. So they're eating these big meals, that are going to spike glucose, and then in between those meals, they're snacking as well. They're eating, chocolate bars, Snickers, and I don't know. It's just, and I look at them, and
it's almost like we saw like basically we picked out the big problems in America and just imported them.
Yeah, and I mean Jamaica especially is very vulnerable to that based on where we're located, because like the culture in Jamaica is very Americanized, I should say, because Florida is, you get to Florida in 45 minutes or an hour on a plane. So we get a lot of the Americanized, there's every American fast food. You know what, the other day, I was watching Jamaican YouTube. You know what I mean? There's Jamaican YouTube, same YouTube, but we call it Jamaican YouTube because there's like Jamaican content on there. And they were celebrating Dunkin' Donuts, like opening a branch in Kingston. And I'm thinking, that's like the last thing that you lot need right now. The last thing. Dunkin', they need to bring an LA Fitness to that place.
You know what I mean? That's what I was talking about with Maggi, right? And Nestle, they probably own Maggi as well. They make these sort of I don't know if you've seen peak milk, and these
is that like condensed milk?
It's like a powdered milk.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, in Jamaica we call it Lasco. I think that's Lasco.
And then there's these like hot chocolates, like called Bournvita,
and you mix it in it, and I know, strawberry flavored.
I tasted that the other day, and I nearly like vomited because it was like a shock to my palate in terms of like sweetness. It's like it. On one hand, it looks like, all right, they're helping out people and stuff with, malnutrition and all that stuff that, that can be seen in like some African countries. But on the other hand, these things are not good at all, for health in general. But then, then people also eat that kind of stuff here.
Yeah.
And here, the life is doubly sedentary. It's like even worse.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said about, black people living in the UK or living in European countries, things like vitamin D and that sort of thing, which really, really essential to our health.
Yeah.
Which we don't talk about enough, But yeah, I mean, I think it all starts with education, because what I find is that a lot of people just do not know the dangers in some of these foods that they eat. So, they just don't know UPF is just not a thing. And, I consider myself to be fairly well educated and, fairly sort of conscious about my health as well. And UPF only crossed my radar 3 years ago. And I've been on a health journey for at least 6 years. I think I started in 2019 to really take my health seriously, and I only came across the concept of UPFs, ultra processed foods, 6 years ago. So it's not something that a lot of people are aware of, you know. I only became conscious of the dangers of a diet that is too high in carbohydrates. You know, I mean, too much of anything isn't good for you, but I think as a people, we overdo it on carbohydrates. Definitely, you know, we're eating, you know, carbohydrates are an energy source, you know, and if you don't use it, then you keep it and it turns into fat and so on, you know. And I think that is something that I've only sort of came to realize again in the last few years, because I thought when you talk about sugar, you're talking about like sugary drinks, you're talking about eating cakes and biscuits, you know. Nobody thought that having a fried dumpling, for example, or having jollof rice or rice and peas is sugar. And
I mean,
it's going
to be honest, right?
Your blood sugar. Nobody thought
that. I don't, eating carb in itself is not really the issue, right? Because the carbs have a function. The function is to kind of like give you energy.
That's my point. But that's my point. I am not demonizing carbohydrates. You know, carbohydrates, as you've just said, have an essential purpose. It's what gives you energy. It's an energy source for your body. The problem that I've got with it is that we overconsume carbs, and then we don't use. So if you eat all that carbohydrates, because let's talk about what happens when you eat carbs. When you eat carbs, right? When you eat carbohydrates, that basically turns into glucose. So it gives you, and that glucose gives you a blood sugar spike. So it spikes your blood sugar, then your body produces insulin to try and bring that blood sugar down. So, and how the body does that with the insulin goes into your cells, get the glucose out, and turn it into glycogen, and it stores some of it in your muscles and in your liver, that glycogen, So if you eat carbohydrates, and let's say within half an hour of eating carbs, you go for a walk, you know, or you do some physically demanding job, you work on the farm, it reduces that spike because you've used up the glucose in your blood. So you know, the amount of glucose that the body needs to then turn into glycogen is not as much. So your the insulin demand is also less. And you know, we can talk, and that's where diabetes come from. We can go further with that as well in a bit. But basically what I'm saying is, when you eat the carbohydrates, if you then go and use it as the energy source that it's meant to be used for, then you're fine. It does no harm to you. The problem is people sit and go to bed or go to their desk job and not use it. And then 3 or 4 hours later, they have another meal and it's more carbohydrates. And every time you eat carbs and not use that energy produced by the carbs, your body, your pancreas is going to produce insulin because it needs to bring your blood sugar down. It needs to remove that glucose from the blood. And it takes it, puts it into your muscle, glycogen, and then chucks some into your liver as well. And that's why people then eventually have a fatty liver. Now, where diabetes comes into this, right? If you're constantly producing insulin, right, you will almost become resistant to insulin, right? And that's where diabetes comes in, because the best way to describe it, and this is by no means my description of it. There's this YouTuber that I follow called the Glucose Goddess, and she breaks it down really well. She said that insulin is a bit like caffeine, right? If you never drink coffee and you consume 1 cup of coffee one day, it's gonna, you know, it's gonna give you like an energy boost. It's gonna spike your energy and you're gonna be, you know, filled with energy basically. But if you continue to drink coffee every single day, you become more resistant to that caffeine. So it will take, whereas before when you just started, it would only take 1 cup of coffee to give you that boost. But if you start to drink coffee every single day, 2-3 cups of coffee per day, every single day over a period of time, it will take more caffeine to give you that same energy boost. Yeah.
So the body is basically adapting to the insulin,
body
right?
adapts to it, exactly.
And then you need to produce more and more and more.
And more and more and more and more and more until to the point where the body cannot produce enough insulin by itself to bring the glucose down. Yeah. So it was like, okay, look, I can't, the insulin demand that you're asking me to produce at the moment, because, you know, your body has adapted to this so well, you know, I can't produce it anymore. So that sugar is then left in your blood. And that's when you now have a high blood sugar reading on your HbA1c or whatever they call it, because you've got that sugar still in your blood, because insulin hasn't been able to bring it back down. And that's where pre-diabetes and diabetes actually starts. And one of the interesting things, because when they check for diabetes, they normally check your blood sugar, but one of the things that apparently is a lot better for them to check is your insulin levels, because if you've got high insulin, it means that you're very close to becoming almost like completely resistant to insulin. And you're not able to produce enough insulin to bring glucose down, you know, soon, you know. So I think
so that's why you can look like, you can physically look fit and maybe even look skinny and stuff, right?
I still got diabetes,
but you've still got diabetes because you've just been overloading your body with glucose and your very sedentary lifestyle, and your insulin's just been spiking and spiking. Which is crazy.
I know a lot of people who look skinny and they've got type 2 diabetes, like young people as well, you know. So it's a very, very dangerous thing. So I'm not demonizing carbohydrates. What I am saying to people is that when you overconsume carbs and you do not use it as an energy source, which it is meant to be used for, you are going to become, over time, diabetic. You know, you are going to, and obviously, you know, all of this is also nuanced, because not everybody produces, not everybody bodies reacts the same way, you know. So, but there is a case or an argument that people of Afro-Caribbean and East Asian descent, their bodies metabolizes glucose in, you know, less efficiently than, say, Europeans. So you don't see high cases of diabetes in European populations. But
is it to do with like, because, you know, as you stay in as you evolve in a certain climate, your body adapts to it.
Maybe I'm not entirely sure, but
maybe because we've evolved with, like, in some cases with like little to no access to food, right? And then your body basically, it wants to keep in more. You get what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it could be, possibly. I mean, I'm not an expert. By the way, I'm not an expert on any of this. This is
like like the body is like extremely adaptable, right? It just learns really quickly. And if you keep doing the same thing, like, for example, you know, same thing we're talking about with like carbs and glucose and, you know, insulin and stuff. Same thing happens with antibiotics as well.
Oh yeah,
because there's like, I mean,
similar,
like there's like what I've seen is an overuse of antibiotics for even like little sickness.
So you build up resistance. You build up resistance to it.
The bacteria itself is building up resistance, and then you need to pop more and more antibiotics, and until the point where, or maybe we're even at that point where we have bacteria that's totally resistant to antibiotics.
No, I mean, a lot
which is
has
like
been said
the
about
most
that as well.
powerful thing that we have right now. And so what are we going to do then?
I mean, the world is perhaps again, this is not an area that I've got a lot of expertise in or a lot of knowledge, a lot of YouTube knowledge, because a lot of my knowledge is from YouTube, you know, I've got to say. But, you know, I'm very selective, and I when I hear things, I then go and do my own research and my own readings on it, you know what I mean? And because like this isn't taught to us in schools, you know, and at all really. And even the people who are studying you know, medicine and that sort of thing and nutrition, they're not taught like how our bodies respond like differently to these foods. It's only since recently I think there's been like an industry around this, so to speak. You know, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people who are in this to make money for themselves as well, you know. I'm not going to call names. But you know, like, to be honest with you, like, at heart, I'm a capitalist as well. I'm not against people making money if they're doing good while they're doing it. But at the same time, we need to make sure that people are getting the correct information, you know. So you got to be careful where you get information from, and you have to do your own research. Don't just see something on YouTube or on Instagram or wherever, or TikTok. Oh God, TikTok is the other one. My mom, yeah, she's so, I tell you, TikTok is dangerous. Like, the amount of like madness my mom rings me with, and I say to her like, Mom, where did you get this from? TikTok? I'm thinking, oh, we need to take your phone away. So you got to be careful. You got to be careful.
Because the thing is that these people, like, they wear like a doctor's, you know, like a scrub. Like, you know, the surgeon scrub, and they look like a doctor, and they've got that stupid green screen thing behind them while they're talking and showing a bunch of things that they've handpicked to support whatever they're trying to say.
You know, don't get me wrong, like, social media is great, but the dark side, you know what I mean? You've got to be careful. So I am all for social media and so on, because I have learned a lot of things on social media that nobody else anywhere was telling me about my health. But I try to be, you know, I'm curious and critical and skeptical as well. So I hear something and I go and look it up further. I don't just take it as gospel. So again, another example is veganism. You know, a lot of people talk about, you know, how we shouldn't be eating meat and so on, and then you've got another group of people who are saying, oh, you should definitely be eating meat, and, you know, being a vegan is terrible for you. And I'm in neither of those camps. You know what I mean? Like, I'm thinking you're all contradicting each other, and sometimes you're contradicting yourself. So there's a lot of that as well.
If you once you go to the extreme, right?
Exactly.
The extreme is the worst. You can't just eat meat all the time. Yeah. You also can't just eat veggies all the time.
Oh yeah,
plant-based food.
I'm right down the middle of it. You know what I mean? I'm like, yep, I need to have my veg. Yep, I'm gonna have some meat. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. Have your meat when you fancy it. You know, and I think.
And another thing as well, what you were mentioning with the, like, for example, like let's take the NHS, right? The NHS is under like a lot of pressure, and then we've got GPs who like really want to, like, basically, like, people, you know, you come in, you're out, you come in, you're out, and so there is really no incentive to sit down and work with someone. It's more, what's the quickest solution to this person's problem? All right, that's give them a medication. There is no time to educate people, and you know,
they don't know themselves.
Probably.
I know this, Ambi. I know this. They don't know themselves. Trust me.
Yeah.
Because the health industry and big health or big pharma, you know, they are designed for not prevention, so to speak, but treatment. You know,
I mean, how else are they going to keep making money?
But this is what I'm saying. And obviously the NHS isn't a for-profit thing, you know. But the NHS is on its knees at the moment, and that's another story. But I don't think in the education of doctors going through med school, like generally, they're taught about holistic health, lifestyle, and preventative medicine. I don't think they are. You know, it's very big pharma driven from what I've seen, and I've got, you know, I've never studied medicine myself, I should say.
Yeah.
But when I went to university in Jamaica, and one of the beauties about, you know, going to university, you get to meet a lot of people who are studying a wide range of different subject areas. So even if you're not studying the thing yourself, your mate next door is studying it. Yeah. So you're learning about it from him as he's, you know, and you're chatting about it and so on. So that's one of the great things about university. And when we talk about, you know, health and nutrition, I can see the gap. I can see that there's a massive gap in what they're being taught in classrooms or lecture theatres to, you know, actual preventative lifestyle sort of medicine. You know, they are not designed to help you to build a lifestyle so that you don't get these diseases. It's
and that's, you know, a bit of a shame,
about how you treat cancer. That's
you know, like a lot of the things that we're currently suffering right now, not all of them, but quite a lot of the things that we're currently suffering right now can be treated with a lifestyle change.
100%.
Rather than medication.
Diabetes is the biggest one.
Yeah.
Diabetes is the biggest one. You know, I think.
Like you mentioned, you were mentioning vitamin D, right? So
okay.
I did my test the other time, and then my vitamin D was like, so basically 50. Can't remember what units of measurement it is. It's like, so 50 is like the average, right? Not the best, but like average. Yeah. So mine was less than 25.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
Which is basically nothing.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
And basically, my mood was terrible. I was tired all the time. Like, I wake up after what I thought was a good night's sleep, but I was so tired still. And this was like just as we're coming out of winter. So that's when we talked about it, and you said to go and do that blood test. And so the average, what I was prescribed, right? So the average, the normal daily, I think daily limit should be about 4,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
And 4,000 IUs.
4,000 international units, yeah.
Yeah, and I was prescribed like 50,000 IUs. But that's like, but that's just to basically like to get my vitamin D back up because it was so low. And that's like something that, you know, we don't talk about because, you know, like when you get like a plant, right? When you get a plant, right, or you get like an animal or something to the zoo, what did they do? They prepare the climate with a prepared environment to match what they're used to from where they came from. You know, the plant, for example, if you have a plant that, you know, grows under a forest like floor, and you don't put it in a place that's in direct sunlight, or the leaves will burn because it's not used to that. And we don't actually think about that for ourselves because 100%. We come from a very different climate, right? We're used to high levels of sun as well. And so when we come here, where it's constantly raining all the time, there's barely any sun anywhere, we don't think of that we need to adapt our lifestyle to fit this climate. And so a lot of people are walking around with our low vitamin D levels, having aches and pains, terrible sleep and energy levels like I was. And sometimes they don't even know. I certainly didn't know, you know. Or there's also people who can be too busy sometimes to actually go to the doctor to go and get a test and stuff. So I think this is something we need to sort of like educate people that to the we almost need to take vitamin D daily as Black people.
We should.
You know, it almost needs to become part of our diet. We can't just eat like we were, behave like we're doing when we're in Africa.
Yeah, yeah. Vitamin D is a very interesting one, because again, that's something that I only came across during COVID. When all these black people were dying in COVID, and I was wondering, rah, wagwan. You know what I mean? Why are we all dying all of a sudden?
It powers your it fuels your immune system as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. So basically, it helps you it helps your immune response, basically. Because there's a lot of, like, during COVID, what was happening was some people were having a strong immune response to the virus.
Yeah.
And what you would find with COVID, from what I understood from listening to a lot of people, was that you'd have COVID, and the first few days, 3-4 days, it feels like a bad cold or flu, and you feel like the body is dealing with it. And then by the time you get to sort of, 7-8 days in, it's almost like, instead of getting better, you start to get worse. And what's causing that, or what causes that, apparently, is because the body doesn't know how to, like, respond correctly to this. It almost over responds, it overreacted, and that created something that they refer to as a cytokine storm, I think it was called. And that's basically an overreaction from the body, from the immune system, where it then shocks everything at this virus to try and get rid of it,
and breaks a bunch of other stuff on the way.
It breaks a bunch of other stuff, and then that's why a lot of people start to have kidney failures, liver dysfunction, all sorts, because it literally was like, okay, like, I'm not winning this war. I'm not winning this war against this virus. I'm going to go and get the entire infantry, the entire military, and I'm going to go nuclear on this shit. You know what I mean?
Did I tell you, like, after I got COVID, that's when I developed hay fever.
Oh, really?
I never had hay fever before, and so, that sort of relates to what you're talking about. And it's so annoying, because I've never had to deal with it before.
It's a mad one, because I think when COVID came out, I noticed, like, immediately that it was a lot slower to get going in the African countries and Caribbean countries. Don't get me wrong, people died in every country, but the death rate in those countries were nowhere near as high as the death rate of people from Africa and the Caribbean as it was in the UK, in France, in America. Nowhere near as high. And I wondered, what is going on? And it's because, obviously, in the Caribbean and Africa, people had, higher levels of Vit D. Yeah. So that's what was happening there, So there, and what vitamin D was doing was regulating that immune response, so it doesn't overreact, And I think there was a study done in Sweden where, they tested some people of African descent who had become really, really ill with COVID. And every single one of them were severely deficient in vitamin D. Every single one of them in Sweden. Again, correlation, not causation. However, by the way, I think YouTube censors your content if you mentioned COVID, so we probably shouldn't be calling it COVID.
Dang it. The
whatever.
Virus, right?
Well, we call it the big C. We should call it the big C.
Yeah.
So, anyways, basically, what I'm saying is that vitamin D is such an important nutrient for the body. It's literally one of the most important nutrients. And I think a lot of people take supplements like multivitamins and all sorts, yeah? And I always say to people, chances are, if you're eating well, you don't need multivitamins. The single thing that I think most people, and especially people of Afro-Caribbean descent, East Asian descent, should supplement for is vitamin D.
So what is that difference in time? So like white people will need to kind of spend a few minutes in the sun, right?
Oh, they get all the vitamin D in about 20 minutes.
But we need like a few
2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's because of the melanin in our skin,
Yeah. I mean,
it's crazy. Got an extra layer.
It's crazy. You also think that, in a place like America, I think that they've got a good climate for black people. And that's why
in some parts of America, depending on where you are, America is a very big place.
Hot areas, in America, sunny areas.
But a lot of those areas are obviously the southern states in America. They are almost not tropical, I would say, but nearly. But it's usually in the winter, especially when you become deficient. And also the thing is, we dress differently. We wear more clothes. Our bodies are covered up. You can get vitamin D through food as well, but you just can't get enough of it through food. So you kind of have to get it from very little. You have to get it from sunlight. So it would take us a couple of hours to get all the vitamin D that our body needs from the sunshine. So,
but what's funny, right? If because black people didn't start moving to, the Western world today. It's been like over hundreds of years, and it's weird how we still have not adapted. But how can we adapt though? It'll mean our skin color like changing, like obviously, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but remember, Abby, humanity evolved over thousands of years, so you mentioned hundreds of years, black people. Europeans evolved to adapt to that over thousands. Evolution takes time. Evolution doesn't happen in a couple of hundred of years. Evolution takes thousands of years. So the fact that, black people have been living in sort of Northern Europe for a couple of hundred years, we're not gonna evolve to be able to regulate that so quickly. What happened to Caucasian people, why they've evolved, that happened over thousands of years. It's not hundreds, and I would say tens of thousands of years as well. You know what I mean? And we're not there yet. We've got a long way.
Do you think? Would we ever be there, to be honest?
You're broaching on another topic here now, Ambi, whether we're even going to be here in 10,000 years, which is not a part that I want to get down, because then that's going to open another can of worms.
All right, that's it. Let's wrap up.
But I think we should wrap it up here. But I think, as black people, Afro-Caribbeans, we need to be more in tune with our health, lifestyle, and our diet. That's something that I've started to take seriously, certainly over the last 5-6 years, and it's done me a world of good. I've lost a lot of weight, and I've become a lot healthier for it. I take my health, wellness, fitness, and so on very seriously. And I think as a people, we should do that. But the only way people can do that is if they're educated. So that's what we want to do on this podcast. So yeah.
I think the simplest thing, if you want to put it very simply, is basically match your carb intake to your activity level. Probably. Yeah. The simplest, if I want to put it very simply.
That's one thing you could do. But I think at a basic level, even more basic level than that, I just want people to know that carbohydrates are an energy source. It's if you consume it, go and use it. Go for a walk. So if you go for a 20-30 minute walk after you've eaten your carbs, you're absolutely fine.
Even 10-minute walk, actually. After having let's keep it simple.
Any walk is better than no walk. But I would
30-minute walk. Everyone's like, what the?
Any walk is better than no walk. I mean, if it's a 10-minute sort of brisk walk, then 100%. But if you're literally, I don't know. Any walk is better than no walk. Any activity
that's one of the best advice I heard. Like, just go for a walk after a meal.
Yeah, go for a walk. Yeah, I think just use up that glucose. Yeah, energy. Use up that glucose. Yeah, because and that's the basic takeaway. That is something that I just want to fill people in on, educate people in on. Carbohydrates are an energy source. So if you find yourself getting fat and you think, I don't eat cake, what else do people think they eat and get fat from? I'm not eating a lot of cake, I'm not eating a lot of biscuits. Yeah, but what is your rice consumption like? How much bread are you eating? How much fried dumplings are you having? Isn't it? You know what I mean? How much fried dumplings are you having? That sort of thing.
Fried plantains.
Oh God, there's so much. You know what?
Yams and stuff.
What one thing I remember seeing this picture of like a basic Caribbean dinner that people eat in the Caribbean, which was like 2 boiled dumplings, 1 piece of like yam, and 3. I don't know if they eat green bananas in Africa. When I say green bananas, do you know what I'm talking about?
Green bananas.
So a green banana.
The unripe ones. The ones that are not
banana.
Ripe,
yeah, unripe banana that you then boil. Yeah, and it's savoury. It's not sweet. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So they've got
we use it to make like beans and stuff.
Oh right. So they've got three of those on their plate, and they've got some ackee and saltfish cooked in some,
I tried saltfish. That thing is very salty.
It's very salty and packed with oil as well.
Almost burnt my tongue off.
I mean, I don't know who cooked.
You're more used to it, yeah. But I tried it.
No, it doesn't have to be though. It doesn't have to be. It's maybe the one that you had too much. It doesn't have to be. They shouldn't. But like, anyways, that's not the point. I'll cook you some ackee and saltfish, and you love it. I promise you. Anyways, what I'm saying here is, so that meal, the standard meal that any Jamaican household would eat, that single plate of meal had about 2,500 calories in it. Mind you, the average person, the average woman, needs about 1,500 calories per day to stay alive.
2,500 calories.
2,500 calories on the single plate.
That's
the average woman.
That's like, a moderately active man. That's what your calorie intake, daily calorie intake should be.
That's all your calories for the day. But that one plate.
That's all in one meal.
Mate,
oh my God.
You're deaf. It's like literally in one.
I'm just trying to hear you again. Oh my God.
On one plate that had, I think it was 2,400 or 2,500 calories, and I'm thinking, that's the problem. And don't get me wrong, it's, the oil was obviously a lot of calories as well. I think most of the calories are coming from the oil, the high fat content. So I think, man, people just need to be a bit more educated about their health and all that. And I think that's what we want to do on this podcast. So yeah, and anyways, it's been great.
Go check your vitamin D levels.
And go and check your vitamin D levels. I think that's really important. And I think even if you're not checking it, I think most Afro-Caribbean people are going to be vitamin D deficient. So just go to Tesco's or your nearest drugstore and get some vitamin Ds and just take some vitamin Ds every day.
I feel so much better now. I wake up even with like less hours of sleep than I was getting before, and I still have energy.
Yeah, and there's a long list.
Crazy.
Yeah, no, it's been a great conversation, and we might come back again. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You got to subscribe. You got to say that I like the video as well, because you don't know already. We need that support in it, and I think it's important that we talk about these things that are important to the community. And we're not just going to talk about health. We're going to talk about making money and politics and whatever else that is going on in the world. I think we can add some meaningful, debate and conversation to. So yeah, big up yourself and take care.